Hello, today I'm going to walk you through how you can begin to read in Japanese and actually build a foundation for your understanding of the language. To be clear, I'm not fluent in Japanese. I've only been studying for about a year, but this is the best way I've been able to learn how to read effectively and get a better grasp of how the language works. Also, don't worry, there's not going to be a ton of garbage in this video. I'm going to show you exactly what I do and how I do it so you can try it out for yourself. So if you find it useful, please leave me a comment, let me know. If you don't find it useful, also leave me a comment. Now, the one thing I do want to mention before we get started is if you're trying to learn Japanese, there will be a million different people telling you a million different ways you can learn. All of them can work. It's all about how quickly you want to progress. You can memorize hundreds of sentences, but it'll be very boring and difficult. For me, I found that I like mixing up my studying. Sometimes I'll memorize important sentences and kanji. Other times I'll just watch Japanese TV without subtitles and try to mimic what they're saying, even if I don't understand. It's all about finding what keeps you interested. If you can lock in and memorize thousands of sentences and vocab, fantastic. If you can't, don't worry. It might take a little longer, but you will still get there eventually. So, this website is called NHK Easy. You can look this up on Google and you can read Japanese articles in Japanese. Now, you want to make sure you go to NHK Easy and not just NHK, because these are the much easier articles that you can read from. Now, the reason I use this platform is because they allow you to listen. Someone can read out the article for you if you click this button. And you can turn the kanji readings on and off, which is super useful, especially if you don't know kanji. Now, I know some kanji. I am far from a professional. But the nice thing about reading articles like this is you will get a understanding of what the article is about, even if you don't know how to read the kanji, which is why this is what I recommend doing. So anyway, let's get started. Let's read through this together. So let's start up here. Yamanashi Ken. Right here, we have the kanji reading. Now, one thing I do want to mention when it comes to some of these kanji, when it has this kanji at the end, which means Ken, it most likely means that this is a prefecture. So a prefecture in Japan, which means this is the name of the prefecture, Yamanashi Ken, Yamanashi Prefecture. So you don't have to worry about the names too much. When you're reading articles, if you see these highlighted words, it most likely means it is a name of something or it is a very, very niche word that you probably will not use. So don't worry about those too much. I'd be more worried about the particles and the other kanji used in the article. Now, the only other thing I want to mention is, of course, knowing hiragana and katakana will make this 10 times easier. If you don't, you can learn it from reading. It just might take a little bit longer, but it's very possible. So anyway, particles are also going to be very important. Knowing your particles and what they mean is much easier when you're reading articles than just trying to learn them from a textbook, because it makes no sense. But when you're reading articles, it makes the particles 10 times easier to understand. So let's get started. So as we said, Yamanashi Ken. No. So no means it's kind of like possessive, which means it's something's happening in Yamanashi Ken. Yama, which means Yamanashi Ken, the mountain in Yamanashi Ken no kazi. So there's a fire on the mountain in Yamanashi Ken. Very simple, right? Now, even if we turn the kanji off or the kanji readings off, looking at this, we know, all right, prefecture, great, because we know this one kanji. We know this is the name of a prefecture. Next, no, something's happening in that prefecture. Yama, which is one of the most basic kanji, very easy to remember. Yama, so the mountain in the prefecture. No, now, this kanji means fire. This kanji has multiple different meanings depending on what context it's used. Even if you don't know how to read this together, you can assume by this kanji that it's something fire related. So literally just going based off that, you already know what this article is about, even if you can't read any of it. So, continuing. 1月9日, the ninth day of January. So that's simple. Again, even if you don't know what these kanji are, you know what this means, right? You can tell this means month, January 9th. So very simple. Even if you've never read these before, you can kind of assume. Mo, meaning, since following since January 9th, right? Mada, which means still. Again, very basic vocabulary. Even if you don't know what this means, you can copy and paste it. Go to a platform like DeepL. Paste it in here. And it'll give you what it means in English. So if you don't know anything, or you don't know some of the vocab, just copy and paste it and keep moving. Now, we reached a kanji without the reading. Now, what I like to do is, I already know what this kanji means, suzuiteiru, which means to continue. So it's still going. Still going since, January 9th, which is today. But if you don't know a kanji, you can go to this website called Jisho, put it in here, copy and paste, and it'll bring up the kanji. It'll tell you what it means, some different readings for it. You don't have to memorize all the readings. I just like to know what it means, so then when I read through, I'll have at least a grasp of what it means. Anyway, so suzuiteru, even if you don't know the conjugations, as long as you know what the kanji means, you pretty much know what it's saying. Anyway, let's continue. Again, yama no, so the mountain something, kazi, the fire on the mountain, no nusu desu. So this is katakana, make sure you know it. Nusu desu, great, news. So the news of the fire on the mountain, basic, right? Yamanashi ken no ue no harashi. All right, great. I haven't read this article before, so don't blame me if I pronounce anything wrong right away. Ue no harashi. So again, when you see these highlighted, it means that it's the name of something. And when it ends in shi, like this kanji right here, it means it's the name of a city. So you can look at these. To otsukishi means another name of the city. And to means both of these. So this and to, you can think of to sometimes as and. So this city and this city in Yamanashi Ken Prefecture. No aida ni aru. Aida, so this kanji can mean multiple different things, but in this instance it's being read as aida ni aru. Aru means something exists or it's there, and aida means between. So it means something exists between the mountains, yamade, right? So based on the article, you can assume that the fire that they were talking about, the kazi, is between the mountains that they just described. So between these two cities, mountain. Yoka, which means the 8th. Again, even if you can't read this, if you turn these kanji off, yoka, you already know because you read this part of the article what they're talking about, right? So it's the 9th, and they're talking about the 8th now. Now, one thing I like to do with these articles to help me remember kanji and remember reading some of these is after I've seen the kanji once, so kazi up here, I want to turn the kanji readings off and go through and read it again. So kazi, now I know kazi. Kaji ga arimashita. Great. So the fire started on the 8th. Even if that's not true, you can assume, right, with some of the other vocab and stuff that you've learned, that that's what it is, right? Between, aru means to exist or it is there, and then kazi ga arimashita, right? Which is the past tense. So it started on the 8th, right? Even if you couldn't read this at all, if they are suddenly talking about the 8th, you can kind of assume that it started on the 8th. Nice. Anyway, let's continue. Kenya jietai. Now, again, some of these kanji are very difficult and not going to be practical. This means something along the lines of like I want to say a police force or something like that. So self-defense force, yeah. So again, not super important. Just, again, copy and paste it. You're probably only going to see this in this article. The chances that you go through another article and find this exact kanji set, not likely, unless you're reading tons of articles. But still important to keep note of. But I wouldn't write it down or anything. Nado, which means kind of like when people say etc. in English, so ken meaning the prefecture, right? And then the self-defense force, nado no. So again, katakana, herikoputa, so helicopter. Ga, which means they're talking about the helicopters. Ga gives the particle, meaning they are talking specifically about the helicopters. And the reason it's ga, not wa, is because it's presenting new information, which is the helicopters themselves. Sora, which means sky. So again, even if you don't know this kanji, if you copy it and go over to a different platform, It'll tell you it means empty, sky, void, vacant, vacuum. You can kind of assume which one it's talking about. It's obviously not talking about empty or void, vacant, vacuum. It's probably talking about the sky because we're talking about helicopters. Again, a lot of it's going to be assumption when you're learning. Kara, which means from, again, basic vocabulary that you're going to learn. Kara, from. And again, Japanese is backwards to English. So you don't want to think about this like you're reading front to back. You want to think about it reading kind of backwards to front. So, sora kara, meaning from the sky, not sky from. Even though, again, you can assume what it means. Mizu, very basic kanji. You would know this if you learned just basic N5 kanji. Mizu o makimashita ga. Now, again, if you don't know what something like this means, you can assume. And that's what I like to do when reading these articles, is not jump to translate everything. Because if you try to translate everything, you're not actually teaching yourself how to learn. So if you read the rest of this and you're slowly piecing it together, sora kara, you know they're doing something from the sky. And then you see mizu, oh, okay, water from the sky. Makimashita ga, don't know what that means. You can assume that it means they're probably dumping water on the fire from the sky. Now, after you do that, you want to confirm. Make sure when you do this, you copy the rest of the sentence. That way, when you're translating it, you don't accidentally just translate parts of it and it doesn't come out right in the translation. So yeah, we sprinkled water from the sky. Great. Again, a lot of it's going to be assumption. Just like when you're a kid and you're learning to read, you're going to assume what things mean. So let's continue. Koko no kamo, meaning the 9th today. Mada heat, still, fire, wa kietemasen. So again, if you don't know what this means, you can kind of assume. It says still, fire. And then it has this kanji with this word that you might not understand. You can assume if it's still on fire that it's not extinguished, which is exactly what this means. It's saying kiete imasen. Masen already means it's the negative form, meaning it's not extinguished yet. Continue. You will also see this when you're talking about lights and things like that. So that is a kanji I would look for because you will see that in different articles. Okay, let's continue. So, 9日の午後5 sorry, 午後5時までに Okay, great. So again, the 9th, afternoon, 5 p.m. So 5 o'clock, 5 時 gogo, afternoon. Great. You will learn those kanji. The more you read articles, they'll pop up often. So when you find something like this or you see it multiple times, write it down. This isn't one I'd focus too much time on because naturally you'll see stuff like this often. So again, it's all about just continuing to push through and begin to remember some of these kanji. At least you know when you see this kanji, which is very, very common, you know it has something to do with time and you can assume what this means. Is it realistic they're talking about 5 in the morning? Maybe. For some articles it's not. So again, you can assume a lot of the times. Next, 16, hectare, which is just similar to acres in America or in English. It's different sizing. I don't know. I don't use that system, but it's a hectare. I don't know how big that is. Gurai, which is about. So about 16 hectares. Great. Hectare, whatever. Next, so this kanji, let's say I don't know this one. Yakemashita. Yakemashita, great. I've never seen this before. I don't know what the rest of, so this means 16 hectares about yakemashita. I don't know what this is. I'm going to assume, based on the context of what we just spoke of, that they have spread across 16 hectares. About 16 hectares, right? So now you can look at it and go, all right, let me test my theory. Let me go to the translation. And great, we come over to the translation and it says it got burned. So we know that the fire spread about 16 hectares. Fantastic. That's exactly what we said, right? So it burned. Now, again, the kanji means a little bit different than what we said, right? This doesn't mean spread, but it does mean it burned down, which again is the understanding of what we're talking about. So even if you guess and it's wrong, like I just did right there with that kanji, you get the basic principles of understanding, all right, It's pretty close, and with Japanese, the context is very important. So understanding that context is already like 50% of the battle. All you have to do is just remember that for next time. Okay, now let's move on to this next part. Kega o shita. Kega o shita. Hito ya tatemono he no higai wa arimasen. Great. So, if you don't know what any of this means, the very ending will tell you pretty much all you need to know. Arimasen. Great. So, whatever all of this means it did not happen. So, again, that's the nice part about Japanese is, again, it's so much of it's context based, even if you don't understand what any of this means, which if you don't know what this means, it means that there were no injuries or anything in in the fires. But again, just getting, if you don't understand any of this, at the very end it says arimasen, which means this stuff did not happen. And again, using some of the context from the particles and things like that, you'll understand. Hito, person. Ya, tatemono, which means person in building. Ya is again, you can use this as and. So hito ya tatemono, which means the buildings and the person. And then arimasen. So even if you know very few bits of the sentences, you can assume what it means. People and buildings, something, he no higai wa arimasen, did not happen. So you can assume something did not happen. And again, this sentence means there were no injuries or anything like that. Next, chikaku ni sumu hito wa, chikaku, close, ni, sumu, people who lives close. Again, you want to, after you read it, you want to go backwards. Hito, sumu, people who live, ni, close. Chikaku ni sumu hito wa, giving the context. And the reason it's wa is because it's talking about something you kind of already understand in the context of the situation. Now, when you're reading Japanese articles, these things are quotes. So think of these as quotation marks. Anyway, let's continue. So those are quotation marks, which means this is quoting something or someone. Ie, which means house. Ie no ura no. Now, this is a more complicated kanji. Most likely, you're not going to know this one, especially if you only know between N5 and N4 kanji. So, if you don't know it, look it up. This is one I would keep track of because you probably will see this in some more advanced articles as you go. This basically means behind or opposite to. So, ie no ura, which means behind the house or opposite to the house. Again, if you don't know exactly what it means, but you kind of understand, you can kind of get a grasp of what it's trying to say. No yama made hi ga kitete. Great. Totemo kawaii desu. Kawaii, very basic kanji that you'll probably learn, or you've probably heard this in anime or any Japanese TV show. Not kawaii, which means cute. Kawaii, which means scared, or sorry, kawaii, scared, this. So, reading it, you can assume right behind the house, made, there was fire behind the house, and it was there, totemo, it was very scary. So there was fire behind the house, and it was very scary. To hanashite imashita. You'll see this at the end of a lot of quotes. It just is quoting someone. To hanashite imashita. This is what they said. So, in Japanese, again, chikaku ni sumu hito wa, the people that live near the mountain. Ie no ura no yama made hi ga kitete totemo kawaii desu. To hanashite imashita. They said, and it's past tense, which is why it's they said. They said it was very scary. There was fires behind their houses or close to their houses. This coming from the people who live near the mountain. And that is it. That is the entire article. That's how easy it is to go from not really understanding anything and to just read through it. And after that article, you'll have a few lists of some keywords and things that you should write down that you will begin to understand. Again, some of these basic kanji, the more you go through, the more you'll see them. Higa, there's always fires and stuff going on. Yama, you're going to see yama a ton. You're going to see things like sumu, chikaku, hito wa. And after reading through 3 to 4 articles, you already start to pick up on how the grammar and the structure actually works. So after you go through a few articles, you already begin learning how to read properly. And then when you begin trying to speak or understand locals, or even go on something like Hello Talk and message them, you'll now kind of have a grasp of what they're saying, even if you don't completely understand. And that's really all what it's all about. As you keep going, you'll get better and better. So if this helped you at all, please let me know. This is just how I do it. Again, anything will work. It more depends on how much effort you're willing to put in. This is the easiest way I've found for reading articles and understanding how to read Japanese. I know there's a ton of different ways. If if it helps you, there's an app on your phone called Today or Todai, which is spelled Todaii, and it's very similar to this, where you can scroll through and read Japanese articles. Very simple, and look at words and translate everything. So that's my recommendation. If you need any help or have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below or just message me if you're in my school. But if that helped you, fantastic. If not, oh well, I hope something does help you. There's plenty of other videos on YouTube. But have a great rest of your day and good luck learning Japanese.